In this duo of videos, I'm going to run through exactly how to edit your audio. I've split the content between fixes that don't require any recording to happen, which is this video, and content that does require recording, which is the next video. We don't actually need to record anything in order to adjust pauses, fix overactive or underactive noise gates, remove breaks, or remove unwanted noises that occur between words and sentences. And if you follow my processes, you'll be able to fix each of these using the quickest methods I've been able to find or come up with. The time savings really do add up. Just before I get into the nitty-gritty of specific types of edit, I want to run through the different philosophies of when to proof your audio. I've tried all of these approaches, and I'd be averse to saying there's a right answer. Method 1 is to proof and edit as you go. You record a chapter, then you proof it, do the pickups, and only when it's finished you move on to the next chapter. This has the advantage of keeping everything fresh in your mind, and it also is the method most likely to avoid issues around needing to deal with pickups that sound fractionally different because of recording on different days. On the other hand, swapping between the two processes all the time will slow you down. A slight alternative to that method is to do it one chapter removed. You record a chapter, render it, upload it to Pozotron, then record the next chapter while the previous chapter is processing in Pozotron. Apart from that, the process is exactly the same, but each time you edit a chapter, you're dealing with the one 2 chapters ago, not the one you just recorded, and it means you avoid the downtime of Pozotron's processing. Method 2 is to do batch proofing, and this is similar to the method I'm currently using. For this, you record in a block of 60 to 90 minutes, by which I mean 60 to 90 minutes of finished audio. Then you proof, then you do pickups. This has all the advantages of the first method, but breaks flow a little less, so I generally say it's the best method for maximizing advantages, but only if it works for you, as it requires you to have quite a bit of time to work without interruptions. Method 3 is to proof everything at the end, which is the process you'll be facing if you're working for a publisher. Technically, it's also the process that you have to use at the end when your author is reviewing the final audio, but pickups should be really minimal, ideally non-existent by that point. For this method, you record the entire book, then you proof the entire book, or the publisher does, and then you do all the pickups in a separate session or series of sessions. And in many ways, it's the most sensible process as it makes sure you're ready to work with a publisher's workflow. I will note I actually use a mix of two. So I record and proof in chunks, as with method 2, but I don't do the pickups until the end. Part of the reason for this is that I do a light touch proof using Pozotron to spot glaring mistakes, even if a publisher is receiving my audio. But I then prefer to wait until the first recording itself is complete before working on revisions. In the end, you need to work with whatever method works best for you. I also want to briefly touch on whether it's better to use Pozotron or review in Reaper, which is a bit of a philosophical question. Pozotron is excellent because it allows us to track along with the script and visually highlight errors. We can easily compare what we've said to what's written and catch small issues. On the other hand, if we proof directly in Reaper, we can have our annotated manuscript up, which may be more convenient, although then we still do need to scroll along with it, etc. Following along in Reaper alone, without the manuscript up, can be challenging because it's harder to focus purely by looking at waveforms. However, it does have one major advantage. We can often visually identify clicks, noises, and other artifacts that we might miss in Pozotron. And the goal of making that easier and more effective is why you saw me render chapters to a new track earlier on in the workflow. Ideally, you'd use Pozotron and Reaper for different stages, but realistically that takes too long, although I still do a very high-speed visual check of my waveforms, albeit only after I import the Pozotron pickup regions. And I also do some extra steps with breaths that I am not covering in this workflow because of the complexity. In the end, the argument for which method to use may just come down to how you prefer to deal with pickups. If you use Pozotron, you'll be importing all the pickups first and working through them systematically. On the other hand, if you proof in Reaper, there's a case for doing pickups immediately each time you find a mistake. Also, I should quickly mention a setting that people often ask about. In Pozotron, changing your playback speed is easy, but in Reaper, if you change your playback speed with the bit down here, the rate, and suddenly sound like a chipmunk, it's because Reaper is also adjusting picks. It's also adjusting pitch, in fact. So to fix that, right-click on the playback area and tick Preserve Pitch in audio items when changing master play rate. That just solves that problem. If you're planning on playing the audio back at anything higher than 1.2 or so, the default algorithm Reaper uses for adjusting playback tempo isn't my favourite. The most accurate one, in my experience, is Sound Touch. It keeps playback accuracy high while preserving clicks and avoiding weird artifacts. So we swap to Sound Touch by doing this. First, let's go to Project Settings in the File menu. Then down at the bottom, click this drop down and change the default pitch shift mode to Sound Touch. In the pitch shifter parameter, change it to high quality, and then save as default project settings, or click OK. With all that done, let's get into the detail of actually doing the editing. Problem one is loud breaths. If a breath is too loud, it's usually because the noise gate isn't affecting it. Here's how to fix it. First, make a time selection over the breath. Click the toolbar button here, the one with the downward arrow on it, and the volume of the breath will be reduced. And then play the audio from a bit before the breath and see if it sounds better. There's a breath. Spectres attempting. There's a breath I don't like here. So I'm going to try and highlight from just before to just over here. I'm going to hit this one down here. What you'll see happen is we're going to get this up here. Drag this down. Attempting in. If it still isn't caught by the gate, then you can adjust the envelope manually. Rinse and repeat is the opposite. Rinse and repeat until you're happy. Problem 2 is the opposite. It's when the noise gate cuts off part of a word, usually a k, t, or s, that is, for whatever reason, quieter than the word before it. Again, you make a time selection over the affected area, and this time you click the one with the arrow going up. That disables the noise gate just for the time selection.
Purely academic.
Fail. Okay, this is a case where we just need to disable the gate with this button.
Purely academic.
Fail. Perfect. Problem 3 is a pause that's a bit too long, so make sure ripple editing is on. Create 2 splits near the beginning and end of the long pause, delete the bit in the middle, and drag the right side to the left or right so the pause is the right length. Okay, there's going to be a pause before the town name, isn't there? So, Labyrinth beneath Zrimlook. Split. Zoom in. Split. Delete. Delete. Beneath Zrimlookworth. From the formidable labyrinth beneath Zrimlookworth. That sounds less odd, so that'll do. Make sure to play back the audio to make sure there's no audible pop created by the abrupt end or start of audio. If there is, either make sure that 2 items overlap and crossfade. So if we zoom in here, we can see here's an overlap with a small crossfade. Or drag the edges further back away from each other and just play it and see when the problem is fixed. Problem 4 is a pause that's too short. It's a very similar process, but you just create a single split. You make sure ripple editing is on, and you just drag the item on the right, which moves everything else to the right as well, further to the right. Don't worry about leaving an empty space. This is why we have got a room tone track. Problem 5 is when there's a long pause that we have deliberately left in the chapter name or for a scene break, and we want to adjust those to be exactly 2.25 seconds long, which is a duration I settled on after a lot of experimentation. To do that, you make a time selection over the pause and run the toolbar button here. Next one. Long pause, and select from just before to just after, hit the pause trimmer. Note, however, if there's any noise above a certain threshold in the pause, like a desk tap, the script will erroneously think that's when the pause is meant to start if it's near the beginning, or stop if it's near the end. So if that happens, you can do this. I'm going to use the pause trimmer again. Select just before, select just after. This is where the pause trimmer is going to fail. So let me show you. If we run it like this, it is incorrectly doing it because of that little bit of noise. So when we see something like that happen, just undo it, add a split to either side of it, and delete that extra bit of noise. Then highlight, run the pause trimmer, and it will run perfectly. Problem 6 is when we need to delete a noise, but we don't want to affect the timing. To do that, we turn off ripple timing, create a split on each side of the noise, and delete the bit in the middle. Next is a noise. And the noise is after the later. Good apologies later. Oh yes, that's referring to the weirdly timed breath. Well, let's just remove that entirely, shall we? Argued apologies later. That sounded weird. Argued apologies later. Cal Asser sat outside. Yeah, good, that's fine. So that has created a gap that will be filled by the room tone track. Finally, I want to just show you 2 more examples. Firstly, here is an example of where I am using free item positioning for applying effectively crowd sound effects by having parallel versions of similar audio. Huzzah! 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 The crowd roared. Here, here! Here, here! This is where I need to note. Okay, crowd SFX required. This is one I'm going to do free positioning on. So track, free item positioning. Huzzah! In Zarimlaquirth. Huzzah! Right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to split and split. And I'm going to actually, I'll just drag that like that for now. Split and split. Drag this. Oh dear. Don't want that happening. I think I'm going to need a bit more screen for this. So let's drag that here. Let's do this again. What I'm going to do is I want to get rid of these fades. So let's just take ripple off actually, because I think it's causing some problems. Oh, they're overlapping. That's the problem. So if I highlight that and bring it down a little bit. There we are. Stop it overlapping. I'm going to make this, if you drag this, it's visual only. It's just going to make this a bit higher. I've also cut off the start of that, which is not good. I'm going to make this a bit higher. I'm going to move this over here so that it is aligned. This over here so that it is aligned, and I don't want them overlapping. This one's going to go over here, drag up. They are overlapping a little, and that is making a problem. I want them aligned. Add some splits over here. Make it nice and short. There we are. We're going to have to bring this down a little as well. Make a bit more space. Oh, this is a bit of a pain. I could have done this with EQ or something like that, but forward to pat, surging forward to. Okay, so that's all of them. So let's just delete these bits, because we're going to need to get the timing right as well. And then we're going to drag the bit over to the right here, because we are going to have to check this in a second. So firstly, this is going to sound too loud because it's going to all play simultaneously. Bloodworth. Huzzah! Surging forward. Oh yeah, so only a little bit too loud. So what we're going to do, add a split on the top one as well. Going to reduce the item volume by 6-ish. In the top of the item. -6. That's -4.5, that'll do. Here. 6.35, that'll do as well. It really doesn't have to be exact science, this. It's more about making sure that they all add up together. Right. And now it should. Grimlockworth. Huzzah! Surging forward to pat shoulders, shake. Huzzah! Surging forward to pat. I think that sounds pretty fantastic. So remove the region. I'm going to turn a 3-item positioning back off. You're going to see we're going to look a bit very odd. Rein in Grimlockworth. Huzzah! Surging forward to pat. That sounds great. And then I also want to show you the power of spectral editing, which I'm not going to go into detail with. It's a fairly advanced technique, but you can see it working here. Elvish ambassador over there, name's Aurendel, is in a fair. There, you hear that? There, name's Aurendel, is in a. Now, we need to check first. Do we get rid of the sound if we cut this bit out? With rip editing off. Aurendel is in a No. Okay, let's undo that. So instead, I'm going to split. I'm going to go to add spectral edit. Now, if there's a noise like that, it's almost certainly up here somewhere. And this isn't always a complete nightmare to deal with these. So I think it is most likely to be this noise here, but I can't be sure. So we can start by getting rid of it entirely. It might make the word sound funny. Name's Aurendel is in a. Okay, so he's definitely put somewhere in there. Okay, so chances are it's either this bit down here or the bit at name's Aurendel is in a. Right, let's see if it's the top bit. Drop the volume again. Ambassador over there, name's Aurendel is in a. No, it's not that bit. Because we dropped that and it didn't make a tiny bit of difference. So double click to reset that back to 0. That means it's got to be somewhere. It's got to be this bit here. Sorry, I'm leaning very close to the microphone now. Let's try getting rid of this bit and see what happens. Over there, name's Aurendel is in a. Right, it is in there somewhere. Now, is it just this bit here? We can check that. Let's drop that. If it is just that bit, then we're reducing it down here. Will stop it. Over there, name's Aurendel is in a fair. Oh, almost completely. Right, I think I just missed the beginning of it. over there, name's Arundel, is in a fair... You can still kind of hear it a little bit. I think it might be slightly bigger in each direction, so we'll just make it a little bit bigger, and we'll reduce the gain like less so that it's not quite so glaringly. There, name's Arundel, is in a fair... Gone. So that's it. Those 6 methods, excluding the 2 extras at the end, cover pretty much every situation you might face when the solution doesn't require re-recording. And in those last 2, in that last example of spectral editing, chances are, unless you've got used to spectral editing, you're going to be better off re-recording anyway. You might still come across a different problem, but usually one of those 6 methods will be the answer. Where's the next one? Would have paused before yet. Scrutinizing the object. Perhaps yet mine effect. Oh, I see what's happened. I marked that because they cut it off. Yet mine effect. Now that one done. In the next video, we'll be working on fixing errors that do require re-recording.